Yeah. No, it's all good. We took care of it.
No, I almost
It was,
didn't know
I
what
mentioned it.
John's
It's funny.
screaming at me, stop.
So it is past 7 o'clock
Yeah,
and
so
you
why
guys
don't we
have a
start?
quorum.
There's no
Yeah, we just,
handicap people in this building. Is
how
that
much
all
of
of a
this
sudden there's no blue collar?
How many do we have online? I see Karen.
Like,
So Karen, Sarah, and Julie are online. Let me see if I can change
5,
it.
6, 7, so we have a quorum. So why don't we
I don't have one.
start the park meeting at 7:02? And we will, on our agenda, why don't we, if we couldn't, well, Jay, you had a comment on the minutes. You want to just make that known, and I would just like if we could defer final acceptance until we've all had a chance to review it a little bit more thoroughly. Do you want to make your comments so we can get that into the corrections?
Yeah, sure. I already talked to Julie about this. But,
Okay.
Do you need, you don't need any more information, do you, or are you okay? If you, the one in the email? Yeah. We're probably good.
You have a couple of comments?
No, just one. I just have one comment on the minutes. I think it says Liz Whitehome, I think, was there. It doesn't seem to indicate that she's listed under present. I thought she should be accorded that.
Catch.
Because she makes a comment later on, right
Yeah, she
away.
was there.
Yeah, but I don't think that,
Yeah, she's not listed, right?
Does it list who was virtual and who was in person? Was everybody in person?
Don't
We
see,
were in person, yeah.
I don't see your name either, Bernie, so I will have to.
I'm on the,
It's the first one.
it does say my name on the
Sure.
first.
that is,
line.
yeah, the only one I
That-
see listed, not present, and she's not even listed as not present, she's just not listed, Liz Whitehome.
So we have 9 listed.
Yeah, this actually was 9.
Okay,
That's all.
very good.
Thank you.
Tom.
Thank you.
Anybody else with corrections? All right, so we'll just take up the minutes finally next meeting. The next item would be our normal public comment. So is there anybody else online that might be interested in public comment?
Only park members and staff are on the Zoom right now.
Very good. Would you like to introduce yourselves and give us your comments? We're ready
I'm
for
not
it.
exactly sure I know what the issue is. I know what the issue is over there. My name is Ann Swike, Swike. Here we go. I know what the issue is over there. I mean,
What's the subject you're talking about? I'm not quite
parking
sure.
garage at Postmark.
Okay, the parking lot.
Parking lot at Postmark. The fact that there's no off-street parking, there's no guest parking, there's nothing. And I have a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo, and I have 1 parking spot. I have a roommate, and that roommate has to rent a spot in the lot next to me at a $50 cost a month. And that's fine as long as it lasts, but if that parking lot is actually built for 30 Haven and the new apartments they put across from us. So once those people move in, there goes the parking. You have this ban at night over here, you can't park at night over there. It's just, everything is against the Postmark. Nothing seems to have been done right over there when it comes to parking. And I don't know how to fix this. There's no place, we can't park in the Knights of Columbus at night, you have to pay for that one. You have to pay for the one next door. You can't park during November to April, I guess, for snow. You can't park anywhere on the streets in Reading from November to April because of snow, which is really amazing because it doesn't snow that often. Why do we have a snow system like that when it could be a snow emergency issue instead? But the biggest thing, like I said, and I know that there's a lot of talk about the parking spots themselves over there in the Postmark garage not being big enough for the normal sized car. If you pull in, you can't get out on one side of your car because they have these cross arrow beams everywhere in that garage. It's very difficult to get in and out of cars, especially if you're an elderly person. I mean, I'm lucky I got a little small Mini Cooper, I'm fine, I can get in anywhere, I don't have a problem. But you really need to give some kind of consideration to the people over there who have 2 people living there with 2 cars and only 1 spot was allotted to them. They need somewhere to park their cars. Be it down at the railroad station, if we could get overnight parking down there. If we could get overnight parking in the banks, would the banks go with that? There's the Eastern Bank and then there's, I forget the name of the other bank, but there's so many banks around there. And then you have all these empty buildings sitting in Reading, why can't we build a parking garage? Instead of putting in more condos, from what I understand, we're gonna build more condos. And you keep building condos, but you're not building the parking to go with the condos.
Could I have your first name again?
A&N.
And strike STR?
SWIKE. And I guess you've heard enough from me. I mean, I don't really.
Well, thanks. Just a clarification, did you say you have, what's the unit that you have? Is it 1 or 2 bedroom?
I have unit 1010, it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. And
Okay,
have 1 parking spot. Now, most people that move in over there, husband and wife, your husbands and wives both have 2 cars because they work. But they didn't, I don't know if they didn't take that into account, consideration, anything like that. There's 50 underground spots in the garage. And then there's, I'd say, 20 outside. And even those, a lot of people, when they moved in, if they were the early persons buying the condos, they all bought an extra spot. Now, wait a minute, how do you get off selling a spot when you haven't got the whole place sold yet? That to me is the wrong way to do something, and the builder should be held accountable for selling those spots. They should take those spots back and give everybody, I mean, if you have a 2-bedroom, it's just not laid out right, is I guess and somebody needs to do something about it, and somebody needs to get us some parking. That's it for me.
okay. Thanks, Ann.
Your turn.
Okay. My name is Mary Parr.
CARR? Thank you, Mary.
Longtime resident. I actually have been involved with the postmark thing and for reasons that, and I know CPCD is involved because my spot's not there. And I had been told that there'd be no problem for a handicapped person. I bought it, or my daughters actually bought it for me because my husband was gonna die in our house over behind Barrows. Stubborn. And he needed a handicap spot. I did too. I'm actually monocular, but I have legal driving. I don't do the handicap. So my argument is it's with DiBiase because he's. But I understand. I have been following online all the meetings about the zoning, the 40R zoning, and it's clear to I think absolutely everyone, not just people who live there as I do, but the merchants as well. We need more parking, and I talked to my lawyer daughter says, well, they can't do anything about the old Walgreens because they're paying their taxes and they can't be, you can't get rid of them by eminent domain. And I said, you look at the old Rite Aid and go, oh, that's probably, it's probably sold, it's private property, and yeah, and I don't know that they're probably paying their taxes or whatever, and so you can't do eminent domain there.
So did you get your handicap spot?
No, what DiBiase suggested to CPCD is that there are 2 in the building. There are 2, and I'm actually the only one that ever parks there because I do have a handicapped granddaughter, quite handicapped granddaughter that I pick up and bring to my house because both of her parents work.
So you have a handicap plate?
No, I don't.
Oh.
No, that doesn't qualify you, because I am not handicapped.
Right.
Yeah, not being, not being able to see out of your left eye is not a handicap to driving. I've been that way all my life, so, and, no problem. But I have one for her that I can use
Right.
on the days I pick her up. And I use it then because I have to, absolutely have to have access on both sides. I mean, I can't, it's like I told him, I need access on both sides. Heck, my spot is not legal, it's narrower than was in the design. And they said, oh, it's only 2 inches narrower, and, it has a crossbar, because they didn't anticipate, they didn't do due diligence. And know that Reading is built on, my husband was geophysicist, so moved here for with task. After he worked on the Apollo project and, one MIT startup after another. But if you knew how, you could know how Reading was built, get the old USGS papers, it's all these, berms and, anyhow.
Just a question, Mary, I just want to make sure I have it clear. Do you have a unit at Postmark?
I do, I'm in 1011.
Okay,
I'm on,
and
across the
you,
hall from Ann. And
okay.
my issue.
You have one, you have one spot that you either bought or have,
Yes, I bought it. My
Okay.
daughters bought it.
Yeah.
And it said, Mom. 2 bedroom, 2 baths, one spot.
and you have one,
spot
and you have one
that
car.
was supposed to fit, it was supposed to be accessible, and it's narrow. But that's an issue for CPCD because, he hasn't, the building has not, it's been all sold out, but he hasn't, pulled it. It's not ours yet. He hasn't turned it over to the HOA. And I think he can't because there's an ongoing resolved issue with the parking. But I'm just I've been following this with interest. I love walking downtown, raising 4 kids and practicing even for a few years in Reading. I'm always a working mom. I gotta get back to the office. And so I buzzed around and now I get to walk around and see how pretty it is.
It's lovely to walk, isn't it?
Huh?
It's lovely to walk around, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It's gorgeous. I love walking around the library and I try to get my steps in with my dog and all that. But anyhow.
So you have one spot, you have one car,
Yeah,
so you're all set.
I'm okay. It doesn't work.
But the
for me.
handicap issue is that you have a car that you have to have a handicapped person that you transport, but does the space that you have accommodate that?
No,
Is that what you're saying?
no, it's, the people next to me are very nice. They pull as far over as they can.
Okay,
I pull over next to the cross beam,
She's got the X beams.
yeah,
I
so,
had that, and try to, even pulling over as far is not legal, so, CPCD, I think, is going to deal with that. I have a biggish dog that I walk all over.
Mhm.
A lot handier than having 4 kids that play soccer.
I'd like to know what the size of your parking space is, if you could measure it, because there's standards that those parking spaces were supposed to be built to.
Yeah, mine
And I'm very sorry that this has happened to you, and I'm really glad you came to talk to us.
Well, I've talked with Julie Mercier because she came over and measured. It's as the owner or the builder says, it's only minus 2 inches in terms of width. Well, you try open the door fully if it's open, I have a sedan, I have a Prius, but you try to open the door to get the dog to jump in, I'm not lifting. I said, with him, it was easy. I can tie him to the post, back up, open the door. It's a little tougher with grandkids. I mean, I have a car seat.
Can't tie them to
tie the
the post.
grandkids to the post.
Huh?
The developer fixing these issues?
She tried.
I tried tying the grandkids, the little ones, you know, because their car seat's on the other side from with it. But, you know, I mean, I'm retired, so I wouldn't lose my license as a pediatrician, but, you know.
So we have asked the developer to submit a proposal to CPDC. We have not officially received
I
that
know.
proposal as of yet for the private parking issue, but we are.
The other is really of concern to me. I understand why you gotta plow it, you know, and why you can't go, because I know what happened. Last year, you just did a snow emergency only and everybody parked on the street and
As long as
it's,
you park on one side, what difference does it make? Somerville does it that way, Chelsea does it that way.
well,
You park on one side when there's a snow emergency,
and you,
and you
yeah.
plow the other side.
Well, that's kind of a narrow street for all the emergency vehicles that go through there. It's one way, except late at night, you know, when the bars, the downtown businesses serving alcohol let out. Sometimes it's not one way at night, as I've learned. I look both ways at night.
Did they tell you when you moved in that there was no overnight parking in Reading?
They did not tell anyone
And
because
it's not in any contract?
last
or
year
anything?
you didn't enforce it. You just had a snow emergency, which of course people could ignore, get plowed in like Southie. You know?
They were towing cars.
Yeah, I know they were, and you know, I understand why there's no overnight parking and all that stuff, but it means the town, you know, if you're gonna do 40R, you know, people aren't gonna, you know, I like, you know, the improvements to the downtown personally. You know, I don't miss the traffic cement thing that somebody crashed into and they
The
were.
dummy.
I miss him.
I don't. It looks a lot better, and that's because of the businesses. And, you know, they need places for people to park. I understand that. I understand the economics of developing. I watched all the, MAPC presentations.
Right.
Yeah, I've watched them. So I understand about the economics, but I think it's back on the town to figure out, and you know, I can't imagine tearing up the town lot behind CVS. That would be murder for the merchants. Well, that would,
Some developers buy an extra lot for overflow parking. So, I mean, your developer knew there was no overnight parking, so it's not like it's a mystery.
He tried to buy the parking lot.
He tried to buy 30 Haven, but it
Yeah.
wasn't.
wasn't for sale. Yeah.
Can I just chime in really quick and just say, hi Mary, it's Julie Mercier.
Yes, I see.
And hi Ann. So I have been working with the developer to come up with a proposal which they need to bring to CPDC to try to rectify some of these problems. And while I think it is wonderful that Mary and Ann came tonight to provide their feedback, and the park should definitely take into consideration what they're saying, the correct forum for this discussion is really the CPDC, and it hopefully will be on an agenda in the next couple months.
Okay, but
Is it your view that the number of cars that people own, is that less than the 70 spaces that you indicated were available for the residents there?
yes, it's fewer than,
So the number of cars that people
because
own that live
some
there?
people were able to buy two. You know,
Right.
some of the early people who got in there early were buying two. So, you know, that isn't my issue. It's my issue with CPC and the developer. But I think in terms of parking for the benefit of the merchants and the neighbors and people, you know, it's very expensive, I know, to put parking under, and there's not much return for it, but
I guess I'm just trying to understand whether you believe that the total number of cars that are owned by residents are the 70 spaces there enough for the cars that are owned by the residents?
no.
And why do you say that?
I would
because-
say about 80% of the building is two car owners.
So you're saying that the number of allotted spaces, this 1 1/4 ratio of spaces to residential units was not sufficient in this particular case?
Yes, I don't know about the other proposed developments, but
But we don't have the hard data. We have to know, it would be useful for the residents to help us understand that by taking an inventory.
I can try and find that out.
All right.
I will find that out.
That would be helpful for us to know, so maybe that could be a follow-up, because that would affect our recommendations going forward. But as far as what I'm a little confused about on your comments is that you have a space, you have one car, nobody else that's living with you has another car. And as far as you're concerned, you have a space to put your car for overnight. So you're concerned about overnight parking, but it's not, you're not concerned for yourself, but.
Not on my behalf. I actually am renting a spot because I have, after my husband died last fall, before I moved in, before the whole thing, I was living with another daughter out of town.
Yeah.
But, so things aren't my problem so much as I'm saying, I'd love to see this area redeveloped. People are, the railroad is great. Tom and I used to go into, we used to love going into town. We loved it, the railroad, but
But if I could keep you on track and ask you, what is it that you're concerned about with overnight parking if you already have a space to put your car? Do you have a second car that you're
No.
concerned about?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm just,
Like I said, I have the seconds, I rent a spot.
You rent a spot because you couldn't buy a spot
Yes.
in your.
I have one spot inside the garage.
You
for
do?
me,
Okay.
but I don't have a second spot, so the person has to rent
So why do you need a second spot, I guess?
because he has a car,
Who's he?
my son.
Oh, you have a son that lives with you?
Yes.
Got it. All right.
And the thing is, if they take that parking lot away, then there's nowhere for them to park. And I know that there's a lot of people in that lot that live in Postmark.
Right.
That park there because they have 2 cars and only one spot.
Got it. Okay.
So, yeah, essentially you're telling us that eventually it's going to get even worse.
Yes.
Because then that lot's gonna go, whatever's gonna happen to it in the
Yes,
spillover.
yes.
And you won't have a space to put
Yes.
your second car. Okay.
And then even people having family over, there's nowhere to, you have a house, your family comes over, they park on the street. We don't have anywhere on the street that we can park.
I got it.
You
Okay.
sound like me 3 months ago when I used the birthday party, when people come over for a birthday party, where are they parking? I don't know.
See, it's really annoying that there is no parking in this town.
Right. Well, I think that's
Extremely annoying.
That's one of the reasons that we've been appointed to this thankless job of trying to find parking spots
Yeah.
where there are no spots. Okay.
One thing I want to pull out though, Mary said, that she loves walking around and she loves walking her dog and she loves taking transit or taking the train into the city. And so, how do you balance, a parking need versus, the more parking lots you have and the more parking you have, it makes it less desirable to want to walk and to want to be, go into transit because you're making it less desirable as a place.
well,
So how do you, go ahead.
Where do I get fruits and vegetables and meat and stuff? Market Basket? Walkable Reading?
No, it's not.
Not just
Absolutely
like-
not.
I go over to the Drew's stew very carefully, but I certainly don't get, what
So
a
you're-
person needs. So all these other people, there isn't everything available that's walkable.
So if there was a path that you could get to Market Basket, would you walk there? Like that you felt that you weren't going to get hit by a car? If we're safe, exactly.
Oh, God, yeah.
How many bags of groceries do you typically buy when you're going to Market Basket? Would you
For one person plus one dog?
Yeah, well, would you carry all those back and forth to
No.
Market Basket?
No.
So you would, walking
Sidewalks.
to Market Basket is not an alternative for you?
No, it'd be nice if,
Okay.
all these new
So it could
places
be.
that fresh.
If you went every day,
Something
you could do it. If it was a
So
15-minute
would you,
walk that you did.
so Mary, would you shop every day walking back and forth to Market Basket as Jay thinks that you should?
I prefer not. I like the library. I like to walk around here.
So you're not gonna,
Jay, you walk-
so you're not gonna change your
What?
life, just because Jay thinks that you should walk.
If I had a path to walk there, I could. And I could walk there, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
So would you, so,
Where were you?
I am. I live at the corner of Salem and Pearl.
and so,
Could we get back on track as a committee about what we are here to actually solve? While I empathize with the fact that people made some perhaps less than ideal choices about where to buy real estate without considering their own parking needs, we cannot solve that.
so this is,
Private parking issue
point,
is not
good
the
point, Liz.
purview of this committee, so can we get back to our own agenda? Oh, I think we've heard our comments, but we've got plenty we really need to do.
That's fine.
that was, you asked who that was. That was Liz Whitelam. She's one of our park committee members. Did you have a
The
comment?
vice chair.
No,
She was the vice
that's
chair.
rude, but that's neither here nor there.
Well,
That's
sometimes
fine,
it-
I'm done, you've heard me talk, you've heard Mary
Yep.
talk.
Sometimes these go on for like 4 or 5 hours, so I think
Yeah, I
that's
know
just
that.
what, but it was, yeah.
We got it, we hear you, and we understand, but we have a huge agenda that we need to get through.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I apologize for her remarks, so, sorry.
Ladies, before you go, could I just ask a question? When you were presented to buy in that building, did the subject of how was the subject of parking broached to you?
No, you had one spot. You had one spot.
So
And,
what,
you know, when you buy, and usually
Right.
the realtor tells you all the little ins and outs about the place you're gonna buy from. The realtors, my realtor didn't say, hey, you might wanna buy an extra spot.
Right.
Get in on the floor, get in early and buy an extra spot. My realtor
really-
didn't tell me that, and, you know, that's my fault. And maybe I should move out of the town of Reading to another place where there's more parking.
Or you could move somewhere you don't need to have a car, where it's closer and more walkable.
Yeah, Florida,
Thank you, ladies.
Unfortunately,
Thank
well,
you. Thank
I have my
you.
Have a good
reservations
night.
on Florida.
Florida. 2 years.
thanks very much for your comments. We
Thank you,
really
Liz.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much, I appreciate
You
it.
guys have a
Very
good
good talking to
evening.
you.
Hope you're
Thank you
not
very
here
much.
too late.
No.
Wouldn't want anybody to have to stay up.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Sorry if that seemed rough, but I cannot be listening to somebody's grocery concerns when
Yeah, I think,
somebody's lack of planning when they were buying property is not the town of Reading's problem. We need to solve the real larger problems like visitor and overnight parking, and that is legit. But
yeah,
everybody who bought in the postmark knew they were buying one space. This was not a surprise. So I
I think that,
empathize, but you know, we can't be doing this all night every time.
well, I think the reality is that, that is exactly what happens when you offer properties for sale. You cannot control and restrict the people who buy it as to how they run their lives. Even though we'd love to run everybody's life the way we
Not
think
running
they
their
should be
life,
lived.
you
but-
just,
No, we don't need to run their life. They just need to research their
Yeah.
own needs before buying property.
you buy a company without reading all about, you know, the profit and losses and.
I have counseled people for over 40 years on their investments and how they spend their money, so I'm well aware.
Buying an apartment is like buying an investment for yourself or it's rental.
Yeah.
And part of
So
those
should we
contracts
order,
would be,
so should we order all these people to move out of Postmark that made poor decisions?
no, they can stay there. They don't have to move out. They just have to live with what they bought.
In my mind, those ladies came in, they had a beef, they wanted to be heard,
All right, let's
so we
move on.
heard them.
Agreed.
Right.
Yeah.
And just to add in, at the select board meeting last night, Bernie, when you and Liz were there and someone else from Postmark was talking, the select board said that wasn't the correct forum, and they told them to come to Park.
Which
That's very
these two-
interesting.
Which these two people did. The other person,
Right, right. So
Said
I'm
that
just
he-
saying, that was said to come to Park, so they came to Park. So moving on, I just wanted to say that, that's all.
No, that's fair, Sarah, but they were talking about coming to Park for overnight visitor parking, which is something we are trying to solve. But I'm not trying to solve, I have 2 cars and didn't accommodate that when I bought real estate, like that's
I
crazy.
know, I understand. I think once you start talking, everything comes out, you know, so sometimes it's hard to keep it all to the point.
I hear you.
It's all
Yeah,
interrelated, unfortunately. Well, fortunately or unfortunately.
yeah, no, I think we did, Angelo did, he pointed out there were quite a lot of residents who do have more vehicles than they were able to buy. And I think, do we have any more he's going to try to collect some data. I don't know if we have any more information from him.
But that's not, is that relevant to this meeting?
It's relevant in this,
We need to solve a private parking issue.
Yeah.
That's not what we're here to
We're not
do. We're
talking
here
about
about street parking and town parking lots, not whether somebody made a mistake buying in a property where they couldn't accommodate their own vehicles.
Because they didn't read the contract.
yeah, well, I think that,
There's nothing more to say about it, though. We're not solving a private.
no,
I don't think it
what,
was in the contract is what she said, though. That's why I asked the question if they were informed or not, because,
Well, then there's legal ramifications. I'm sorry. to interrupt
yeah,
you.
no,
Yeah.
it's,
You know, but it's not,
And they
it's not our
were,
problem.
Chris. I've talked to, because I'm downtown, I've asked people as they've been coming in who I know are in the park, in the postmark, did you know when you were buying there that there wasn't overnight parking and that you only had the spot that you bought? And all of them said yes.
Okay, that's interesting. I agree.
I mean,
I
and
feel like that'd
as I
be,
emailed to Chris earlier, when I was in my 20s and renting apartments in places, I would not sign a lease until I knew what I was going to do with my car. That's just, functioning as an adult.
how many bathrooms does this place have?
I mean, I don't
I think
understand
they'll
why
know
people are surprised that when they don't have a parking spot, they don't have a parking spot.
Agreed.
I think as it relates to the park committee, what we have is a situation where there are residents who have more cars than they have parking spaces for.
Which is their problem.
Which is the public's problem, because now they have nowhere to park, so where are they gonna park? They're gonna park on the public lots. That's why we're here. So you
Yeah, well, I
cannot
mean, it'll be great
deny.
if, again, coincidentally, if we can come up with visitor and overnight parking generally, so that if people do have visitors, because I think we should try to solve that. That's why I think what we suggested about some of the lots and the spaces down by the train station to be used for overnight visitor parking, then that's what these folks can do too. But we don't need to solve it personally for postmark residents. We just need to solve it broadly for the community.
Exactly.
Well, we'll probably need to solve it for Postmark, we'll need to solve it for Gould, we'll need to solve it for every development that's coming in, because this is not going to be an isolated case. This will repeat.
Right, no, I agree,
This will
I agree.
repeat
But let's
over and
come up
over
with our
again.
plan for overnight visitor parking, but let's
Yeah.
not fixate on the postmark specifically.
I think that was the gist of why they came, so that they said that they need overnight parking beyond what they have, so, and then it just spilled over into their other issues. But I think they came because they need overnight parking.
And the reality is that it's not just overnight, because if they have a second car and it doesn't go into the 70 spaces, then they're gonna have to park somewhere else during the day. So it's gonna be a day and an overnight parking problem. And it's going to be multiplied times every unit, it'll be multiplied times every unit that's built downtown. So I think that's the issue that we've got to
Isn't
deal
the
with.
developer involved here at some point, as far as, it's really their problem and the
Yeah.
condo association's problem? And our solution may be very general, but I'll bet you $100 that a year from now, if we determine some parking situation down for overnight parking at the train station, it's not gonna be enough overnight parking, because all of a sudden, everybody's gonna wanna park there, so.
Correct.
Precisely the issue.
It's not entirely our problem, it's not our problem at all, but we can't take the burden that should really be placed on the developer and the management company.
Yep.
I agree with Karen and I agree with Bernie. I think I agree with most of everybody. I think our duty with the park committee is just to gather the data and present it to the select board. So we're looking into why other cars on Sanborn and Haven, and now we know, and we give it to the select board and it's their ball.
Yeah, Karen, you're absolutely right. The more parking that there is, the more that people will use it too.
They will.
The issue we're solving for is not
Hey, John's there.
to facilitate additional parking for the residents of Postmark or any other of those developments. That's not what we're solving for, right? We are solving for parking for the time period where we've identified that there are parking issues for the downtown businesses and the rest of the residents who use downtown.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, that's what we talked about in the beginning.
I think essentially what ended up happening is this was a blip months ago when we started, and then out of nowhere, because the overnight parking ban went into effect, no snow, all this stuff, then they're flooded with calls, tickets, everything, and now it's spilling over where it was a blip for us, and now it seems as if this is our sole focus for the next 6 months, which unfortunately can't be the case. So I did speak with Deputy Chief Amendola after I saw an email come in about complaining about the situation that they described. So I wanted to find out, because typically, I know you'll think I'm full of it, but whatever. Typically, within 5 minutes, I can figure out at least a temporary solution that's going to work for something. Whether or not it's feasible or not, I can usually come up with these kind of things. And once I saw this, and then I spoke to Deputy Chief Amendola about the overnight parking, the issue ends up becoming, they used to have overnight parking at the senior center, but then that they ended up getting rid of it because people weren't moving their cars. So no matter where we decide we want to have the CVS lot, overnight parking, they're still not going to move their cars, because that's how it was before, and that's what's going to happen this time around. So for us to come up with something, I just don't see, like, unless how they mention the banks, seems like the only feasible way that we're going to be able to solve this is somehow private property that we're going to have to rent. But once again, it's not our problem.
It's not our problem. And if the issue is not right, it's not overnight parking. It's parking. It's them not moving their cars in the morning. Guess what? Why wouldn't the police department call in the tow trucks and tow them out? Right? Do it 2 or 3 times. Issue solved.
Yep.
She
right?
told me.
And so if we can't keep bending the rules, right? If we set up rules, or if the town sets up rules, establish them and live with them and enforce them, right? And the problem that, Chris, that you're hearing is right, that for decades there's been no overnight parking during the winter, and then that went away, and now it's coming back. And right, people got used to being able to park overnight. Unfortunately, that happened right when all of these developments were filling up. So the absolute wrong time for the police department to take a unilateral decision and do away with that overnight parking. It sounded great, but it has repercussions that we're living with right now.
Is this on the agenda?
This was part of the public, item number 2 on our agenda is public input. We received some public input.
Okay.
And we're discussing the ramifications of that public input. I think that's what's going on here. So yeah, I mean, I think that, as far as how it relates to our agenda items, is that we have a fixed supply of spaces in the town. We have a demand function that says, we have so many people that need to park. The number of people who need to park for many, many reasons. And we just heard a couple of reasons why we have a set of permanent parking needs that those cars are gonna have to go somewhere. And they're either gonna take up the number of spaces that we have as total supply, and we're gonna have to find a way to allocate some of the supply that we have to accommodate these people and all the other people that are coming in with more development, as well as the normal flow of traffic.
But one of the other options is that they could be sold. The cars can be sold.
I don't think we can impose on somebody.
I'm not saying that you're telling them to sell them. I'm saying they decide to because they don't have a place for them and they don't want to pay the extra money. Well, it's not our responsibility to pay.
That's an amazing solution. So the government is going to require somebody to sell their car.
The government's not requiring it. They're doing it because they're. No, I'm not. I'm saying they don't have a place for it. That happens in Boston. You can have it happens in lots of cities.
I'm just saying that
you don't have more than one spot.
It's a rather draconian solution.
No, it's actually a future solution.
Life issue.
It's literally better.
We can make it so difficult for somebody that they
don't have cars, and then everyone walks around in bikes, and it's wonderful. And you don't have
honestly, Jay, we've heard it all before. we've
mean,
got,
this is the-
we've got
where we're
real
going. I
people
just-
with real problems, with real cars. We can't assume it away or just tell them.
This is literally the way that the world's going.
No.
I was just in a 3-day conference with MassDOT
All
about
right,
this.
I'm going to call an end to that conversation. Let's move on to number 3.
Oh, that works.
We've
We're
got
on the same page on that
a
one.
debrief from the update to the select board. Do we have any comments on that?
I'd like a debrief, I
I
didn't see
like a
it.
deep.
Yeah, I'd like a debrief.
I wasn't able to make it, so just from Liz,
Liz, would you like to start?
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Liz.
Well, Bernie and I had a late night with the select board because those poor folks, as Chris can tell you, were interviewing town manager candidates. So the agenda was running a little bit late. So we were the 10 o'clock special that night. And yeah, we just, Bernie, I don't know if you have the presentation, copies of your presentation with you.
I do.
And if not, we can ask Julie and Andrew to email it. I don't remember if we asked them to do that, but anyway. So we sort of just gave an overview of like, here's where we've been, here's what we've done, here's what we're thinking about, and said, here's where we broadly are, and the fact that we need a couple more months to nail down the specifics. Basically, that's, the select board was not looking for detailed answers. They were looking for like, how's it going? Are you making progress? Why do you need to extend this? And dear Lord, is there any hope?
So it did get extended to April 1st, so we shouldn't get complacent.
Right, with the express goal of not using that time if we can help it.
One thing I noticed in the notes was that apparently we agreed on some things, and Julie said that it wasn't official. And I was thinking it might be worth low-lying fruit to look back at what those were in the last meeting and see if there's more things that we all agree on. If that seems to be a good use of time.
It's actually in there.
Is it?
So, yeah, let me find the page you put it on.
So what I meant by that was that there were certain things that you took a very clear vote on, and then there were other things that were just kind of like generally supported.
Okay.
That was my memory, at least, of what was going on. So.
Is it important
Summarized
to
on-
get more?
Summarized on page 16. So.
Yeah.
So I think that, we just we didn't provide any specifics about what the recommendations are. We didn't really have anything to offer at that point, so. And I think we just kind of covered the survey, the supply demand. Liz talked about the things that had been done previously, although we didn't spend a lot of time on that. And then these recommendations, spent about 10 minutes on this, and then kind of wrapped it up and referred to the supplemental material. We didn't cover the supplemental material in detail, but, I just referred to it that I thought it was important for the people who provided suggestions and input in the survey, that it was worth, they took the time to spend submitting their comments, and I recommended that people read those, and otherwise that was it, pretty much.
I watched this morning, I watched your presentation. I thought it was an excellent presentation. You hit all the bullet points. I think there would have been a little more engagement on the select board. I think they were probably a little tired from that night. So,
Yeah.
so I think they kind of shortened you guys up because of that. But I think it would have been a better conversation had they been a little fresher. So I think the next time that you do present to them, I think it'll go a lot better.
Even I didn't make a comment, which is very rare for me. It just, it was the unfortunately wrong place at the wrong time, but it's extended till April 1st. We'll still aim for February like we had in there. And, we just gotta get back to it and we'll get there.
Have you been able to make a comment?
Oh, yeah. I usually comment on everything, but at that point, I forget about it.
I will say, Chris,
We started at 5 and it was like 10:30 or
I
something.
did like your comment after the third candidate, the town manager, when you said you feel better about yourself or something, listening to her talk.
Oh, yeah. I felt better about myself in the last 10 minutes than I have in the last 2 years.
Any other comments about the about the presentation, and I think we can probably move on.
Can I keep this?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
I don't think we
Can I
need
ask what that is that you have in your hands?
the handout from the select board presentation.
Okay, is that available online?
It's in the packet,
I
yeah.
sent it to Julie and Andrew, so perhaps you could just forward it on to the rest of the committee.
If I talk, maybe the camera will show me and you.
We're gonna
can
forward it
see
to everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
I assumed it would get,
I couldn't find it in the.
I didn't mean to exclude, but I couldn't email it to everybody for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Open meeting, but I did submit it to them, and I assumed that they would submit it as part of this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Got it. So,
So they have our.
I think that we have another agenda item, number 4, which is to
It's
review
just the park minutes, but not.
the street-by-street proposal map, then review parking survey data and other data. I do not think we need to spend any time on that tonight. Then we have to discuss the compiled recommendations, other topics in upcoming meetings. So that's what we have. It's 5 of 8 now. Who wants to take the street-by-street? Are we going to discuss the street-by-street, or has this been determined, or I'm not quite sure what this agenda item is. Karen, were you going to present this as a leftover from last meeting?
Julie took my recommendations that were part of our recommendations, or my street by street, and she outlined it on the map that had originally been developed during her research a couple of years ago. Julie, I did email you. I wanted to know if these recommendations differ greatly from what you had proposed, other than leaving Upper Linden and that area free parking. So I know I did my brainstorming to come up with what could possibly be changed, but I was curious how it compared with your original plan, and whether or not you think that there's places to modify some of the proposals that I had, or some of them that I had that won't work, as far as time of, 2 hour or all day or anything like that.
Yeah, so it's very close to what the staff proposal was. There are a few exceptions, like you already noted that you didn't include Upper Linden Street. That one, I would say, I know the fire department has concerns with the fact that you can park on both sides right now, because it is a little bit of a narrow street. So, I think I originally had proposed parking just on the eastern side, because it's a one-way going north, right?
Right, right. And I think after talking to the neighbors, we decided to leave it open, because we kind of self-police the street by making it hard for people to race up there, because they drive up there very quickly. So it's really more, the two-sided parking is literally right where my house starts, and the units across the street. But now that there's no overnight parking, that is tremendously great.
Okay.
A lot of the issues. So
I do think the police department might want Park to come up with something for just one side of that street, just because I've heard feedback from police and fire that that's something they want to fix, regardless of
what would come up.
because it's a narrow street, more narrow than some of the others, and they feel like if there were parking on both sides, they probably could not get a fire truck through there.
Okay.
So you might want to think about that. And then the other ones that I noticed that were slightly different, you wanted to do something special with Upper Sanborn, which wasn't a whole, totally clear what it would be, but that's to be discussed, I guess. And then there was an area over on Pleasant Street where you were proposing resident only. Is that correct?
I'm not that familiar with that area, and I walk down there sometimes, but I would appreciate your talking from your point of view, what spaces are there now and whether they need to be changed, or can they be modified at all, or is it a resident only because they have no driveways? That was part that I wasn't sure about down there.
So it's currently not resident only. It's currently public 2 hour, and there's some employee parking there too, I think. But we have heard from residents of Pleasant Street recently. I'd have to review their email again. I think it could be that could be an area you might want to make resident only. I'd have to look at my emails and see, but there have been some long standing resident complaints on that street related to parking. So I can get back to you on that.
Okay.
And then the other difference, which I thought was like interesting, and I guess I would ask you all why, so the yellow highlighted areas that are like south of the tracks and also on Vine Street, those are currently treated differently than the resident only areas. And you are proposing to treat them the same, I guess, if I understood your proposal correctly, and I thought that made sense. I'm not sure why they're different, if the goal there was different than the goal on other residential streets.
Sure, because I went walking there to try and figure it out, and I was looking at the signs, and the signs that are there I didn't get. I don't know if it's different because they're trying to prevent commuters from parking there. And so I think that's why it's being treated, because I don't think you can park there now. But I can't.
Oh yeah, you're right. That makes sense though. Okay, so that would be to prevent commuters, whereas the resident only spaces don't prevent commuters from parking in them.
Right.
Right. Okay, that's right. So
yeah, so even there could be more, after 10:30 they can park, because the commuters really aren't coming to the train station after 9.
So why is it that there's issues on those streets with commuters and not on the other nearby resident, or
the whole town?
like are those being treated that way because certain residents on those streets complain to the police department, and like how our map is a hodgepodge and a lot of it's related to like certain complaints that came in and like one-off solutions? Is that just another example of that?
You know what? I didn't even know. I just looked at the street and said, "Oh, spaces," and it's not usually high traffic because it's an odd, it's not like Woburn Street where there's traffic all the time. It's heavily used, but not nearly as heavy as some of the others. So I didn't know anything about that area before I started looking at the map. What did you propose before?
I hadn't. We weren't proposing to modify south of the tracks.
And then actually, I don't think we need to, now that the leased spaces have been turned over to employee and 2 hour, because when you look at the street, the farther up you go, you're way far away from anything you're gonna need to do downtown. And it really would be employee parking, but I feel like we have enough employee parking if we open up Woburn and some of the other areas. I don't really think that it needs to be touched, but that's just my personal opinion. I don't.
Could I just ask a question here? I'm getting hopelessly lost in this discussion. We have, I guess what I'm trying to understand is what, Karen, you had a set of street-by-street proposals that we had a list of those. And now it seems that you and Julie have put those together in the form of this map, which I, quite frankly, as good a Boy Scout as I am, I cannot follow all the complexity of this map and how it relates to what we already have and what proposed changes. Is it possible that we have this in the form of like an Excel file, a text file, where we could say, here are all the streets, here are all the current regulations and what we're proposing? Because I can't really see what we're doing here.
Okay, so if I can step us back, Julie and her team created this map at the beginning of her process before, and we're simply looking at the map that she had created 2 years ago as part of the information sessions that she held for the public. And this is the breakdown of certain changes that they were planning on making at the downtown parking level. So part of the discussions were, for instance, getting rid of the leased spaces and making them employee or 2 hour parking. And so she used this exhibit to illustrate to anyone that came to these meetings to show what downtown currently has as far as parking regulations, street by street. And it was a way of, each street has some numbers on them. You can see, on Chapin Ave, there's a 6 and a 13. Those are the number of spaces that there are on that street for a car. So I believe the information came combined from them walking the pavement and using some of the reports that were generated by the consultants. So when I've been doing this process with us as a group, I revisited her map so that I could see where we could squeak in some additional employee parking to accommodate some employees so they don't have to walk as far, which seems to be an issue for some people. And to also be mindful of the residents that live in the area because they don't want commuters parking in front of their house at 6 o'clock in the morning, or they don't want, they want to park in front of the house sometimes as well. So that's what this map has been. It's been around for a long time. The street by street analysis or proposals that was part of the Excel spreadsheet that we worked on a couple of weeks ago, Julie took the street information that I had on that Excel spreadsheet according to the colors that are on this new spreadsheet to see what I had changed or what was supplemented to what she had already proposed. So a lot of people up in the School Street, Bancroft area didn't want parking regulations in that area, and noticed issues were a problem last time around, so that's why we're here. So this map, some of the colors are from the very first time she presented the map, and some of the colors right now indicate things that are somewhat changed. But
Right.
it's basically a tool, and all the different parking regulations in town are listed on the left-hand side to kind of try and look at it from an overview and try and narrow it down and simplify it. So if we've got 20 different parking regulations and we want to simplify it, this is just a visual as opposed to just being a spreadsheet, so that you can see how far someone on Chapin Ave has to walk. If employee's gonna park in Chapin and they're gonna walk to Brady Court, it kind of just gives you a visual of it's really not that far if they're gonna park over there.
This is a great map. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with maps, I'm just
I can
trying
just try
to
to explain
organize
a
it.
little bit. So the reason there's it's a multimedia type of map for a reason. So the existing regulations are shown over on the left-hand side in that column, and those are like the hard multicolored lines and in the lots, the shapes, polygons or whatever. And then I use highlighters so it would be more obvious like where the changes are, maybe a little more readable, like that one was done by hand and one was done by a computer. And so the orange areas are the areas that are proposed to be public 2-hour with some potentially also public 30-minute or public 1 hour, which I know is something you guys need to discuss a little more. And then what highlights in pink are areas that would be public 2-hour or all day with an employee permit, except as otherwise noted. So actually one of the things, Karen, that you had slightly different than us was lower Bancroft. You said for it to be resident and employee, and I wasn't sure exactly how you wanted to handle that or what you meant by that. But that's a one that's highlighted in pink, but I noted with my pen that it's like a little different than the other.
Yeah, and that street, when I've walked by it, it's kind of tricky because it's kind of narrow. So I'm not sure, up Bancroft is much wider than that section. So and there's really not that many spaces there. So I'm not sure that it really can be changed to be anything or just maybe make it unregulated. I don't know.
So we originally were not proposing to change that. Like the resident only areas we thought we would just leave alone. And so that one, like if you thought there would be some way to have employee parking there as well, that could be discussed. But like originally we weren't proposing that.
Yeah, I think Woburn Street is plenty up in that area. I think that there's several spaces on those streets. We wouldn't need to impact those streets because I think Woburn is going to solve a lot of the problems.
Just highlight Woburn Street for me,
Woburn is this.
right there, okay.
Yep.
But I think Woburn Street and the formerly leased spaces are going to solve a lot of the Brandy Court employee parking problems. The CVS lot, I just want to make sure that we have enough additional on the sort of northern or northeastern side of town. Yeah, where your little hand is there. So I'm looking at the pink versus the blue, and it looks like we're getting a little more pink on Chapin, and well, of course, green is the Grenade Street that we were talking about last time. I don't know, but we might need to extend the pink, further up Haven and further up Pleasant to actually accommodate enough extra spaces for all the employees that are currently in that CVS lot?
Yeah, that was from me looking at the map, seeing how it was before with CVS and the one blue line there and then in front of Town Hall, I'm like, there's no way. But then when Julie explained that now it's the pink, seeing that all over the place, it makes it more seamless. But I could see definitely, the 5 and 6 area over there of Upper Haven. Seems as if something could be tucked in over there, I'd say.
The other thing you could consider is, and I don't know the feasibility of this, but I do know the consultant, like right where your hand is, Andrew. So Elliott Street, I think that's Elliott Street, right? The consultant noted that there was potential parking spaces along there, and I don't know, like like Liz mentioned, instead of extending the pink further east, maybe look at Elliott Street. But, and then, I mean, to a certain extent, like if it's unregulated, we can also just like alert employees that they can park there without having to put in signage or striping or anything like that. So,
I would just say anecdotally that my employees have had some challenges with some of the residents there in the past when they've parked there, and I'm talking about Reading residents who have parked there as employees. So that's what I'm talking about. Maybe specifically, if we are telling employees they cannot park in the lots, we probably kind of need to give them somewhere specific that is labeled that they can go.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
So Liz, I think that they're opposed. Do you think, like up where I live, if it's all open parking, do you think that the employees will go there, or do you think that they will not go there? Because
I think if they're overtly told they can go there, but I don't want to end up back on a committee 6 months from now because all of a sudden residents are like, wait, now there are employees parking there. Like we do have to sort of make it very clear that this is going to be happening. And I know, and most employees are not parking for 8, 10, 12 hours a day. They're parking for like 4 or 5 hours, and it shouldn't be an undue burden.
What, again, I guess I'd like to question the purpose of all these pink areas, I guess, are designated as either 2-hour or employee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so if you want to park more than 2 hours then you only have to be an employee to park there 2 hours or more, right? So I guess the issue is if the employees are not parking there because they're parking somewhere else, then the spaces are empty, and you're not really dynamically allocating those spaces to a high need where somebody really needs to have it for more than 2 hours.
I don't think anybody else needs to have it for more than 2 hours. That's why.
Well, maybe they do.
That's why we're proposing this.
But that's the point. Maybe they do need it for 2 hours.
And they can park in the lots with the kiosks.
Are the dotted lines, could you just tell me what that is? I don't see that on the legend.
This dotted line is the Nelson Nygaard study area where they want to.
So we can ignore that. That doesn't really help us. And the inner core, is that designated somewhere?
Inner core, as Julie mentioned, I guess in this case again is the yellow highlights where you were looking at public 2-hour parking or less. And
So the inner core is everything inside the yellow?
Yep.
And the pink, green, blue Woburn Street? Is that the outer side of the inner core?
Yeah, pretty much.
So that designates the inner core, and then it comes along.
I think Woburn Street's the outer core.
Could you just maybe move your mouse around
border,
the
right?
inner core?
So the inner core is.
I thought the inner core was Woburn and, oh crap.
It's virtually the triangle.
Yeah, the triangle.
You can see from Woburn is pink, but it is virtually the edge.
Yeah, and then come down the other side, please. Down to here.
Yeah.
And over.
Yep.
And that white space down at the bottom, that's part of the inner core as well, or is it the one up above where it says 18 or
Woburn
16?
High in Maine.
I it's up for you guys for discussion. I don't know that there's existing regulations here or what that street looks like. There's some private parking.
I don't think there's any room on Washington Street
Yeah, that's what
There.
I recall.
for parking.
Right,
Maybe I'm
okay.
wrong.
No, I think you're right. There's not room to park in front of
No,
it.
there isn't. It's by the light. You
Yeah.
can't park there.
Yeah, so
Also on Chapin Street, you're gonna lose 3 spots and then one on Main Street due to the Chronicle building
Just the construction or after it's,
during construction, and it's already blocked off.
It's a tough
Well,
application.
after it's done, is there any,
I would assume that they would be
Yes.
coming back.
Yes, you're losing, I think, 3 spots?
3 on Chapin and 1 on Main.
after construction is complete?
After construction. I have a quick question. So Liz, if you have an employee that's parking on Chapin Avenue, how does the parking enforcement person know that their car is an employee versus somebody who's been there for 3 hours they think is violating the 2-hour parking?
Right, well, that's the other part of what Julie's team had proposed. So right now, we have to purchase employee permits, but part of the original proposal was to make them free so that people really use them, so that they go out of the lots, right? Because
Okay,
right now they're hundreds of dollars, so I do not get them for all of my employees. So they do the little dance of, moving their cars after 2 hours. If they're not, some of my employees who work more hours, I get them permits. But
Is
most
this
of my employees,
something-
I don't.
Is this something they hang on their rearview mirror? I didn't
Yes.
see it. Okay.
Yeah.
So all right, so that's how they know.
Oh, yeah.
So as a resident, if you see a car sitting out there for like 4 hours that doesn't have one of those, you could, if you wanted, call the police and say, hey. I'm
Oh,
moving your
sure,
car.
yeah. If they didn't have a hang tag, then you'd know it was
Okay.
not an employee.
Oh, that's great.
But
Thank
current,
you.
just to try to understand the difference analysis, what are these things that are now marked with pink? What were they before?
So the blue here is employee all day or public 2-hour. Green lines is public 2-hour. And the pink magenta is resident only, 6 to 10:30. And
So
then,
in some areas, the highlights and what's underneath are the same,
Yes.
right? Like, so for example, the one that you just showed on Haven Street, Andrew.
I know you know that, but as a person who's just
On Main
looking,
Street, sorry.
I know you know that, but I
Yeah,
don't,
so
I
right there,
have no
there's
clue what
pink
you're talking
highlight,
about.
which means the proposal is for public 2-hour or all day with employee. And the current regulation there, is public 2-hour or all day with employee permits. That one would not be a change. And then there's some like that in the inner core where the orange highlight and the underlying green are the same. Okay.
and the gray is unregulated currently.
So what I can do is put a second map together that shows exactly just the segments that would be changing.
Yeah, that's,
And
That'd be
it's
helpful.
not,
Probably be
it's not a lot, like it's not a super duper amount.
And then along the train tracks here, those are the different colors, so I don't know what that all means.
So the green again is public 2-hour currently, and highlighted in yellow would remain public 2-hour or any specifically designated spots that you may wish.
But I thought those were resident commuter parking, or am I looking at the wrong?
Side of the
North
road.
side on the opposite side of High Street, there is street parking.
Okay, so I'm trying to,
So
so maybe it needs to be enlarged, so there are you're showing two parts of the street here?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is the magenta that you see is the train depot parking,
Okay,
and the green is the street parking on High Street.
all right. But there's green in the middle of the magenta, what's that about?
We had asked when that was changed. I believe that did become 2-hour.
So you took away commuter rail parking to make it, because it's not marked that way right now.
Did we
'Cause I
find out
checked
when
that
that
the other
happened,
day.
Julie? Did anyone get that?
No, I feel like it was since I worked for the town, which is 6 years. It wasn't something that happened like recently as part of our staff changes though, but I feel like it wasn't that long ago that changed.
Because
I didn't get an answer yet on that.
I went by there the other day and none of it's marked as 2-hour parking. It's all marked as resident only. So this is an inaccurate depiction of what it actually is signed right now. As far as I mean, unless I completely misread something, but I don't think I did.
We can check on that.
Okay. Make a note for that.
As long as we're not changing that from commuter parking to non-commuter parking. I think that would be, I can't see that.
So Julie, across
2
the
hour
street
now?
from the.
It says 2 hour now?
I think that there is parking for customers.
Right
if I
outside my window to prove that nobody's.
Sorry,
That's-
Karen, I couldn't hear you.
Is that,
I
what's
think
that?
that across from the
Are you talking about
laundromat,
across the street?
that,
Or what do you?
whatever that triangle building is, I think that
What
that little
No, that's
section
what it
is for customer parking.
Is that?
Look on
I'm looking at
Google Earth,
Spruce Street right now.
Yeah. it
I was
shows
looking
it as
down
2 hour
at the
parking.
end here, because Yep.
So the map is accurate.
so the other
Right, and
map,
it's been that way for a really long time.
the map that we saw at our last meeting showed that green was at the very end.
So what should it be, or what do you, so,
Yeah, so that looks like,
Oh, cool.
oh yeah.
that is
Sorry.
not,
I
that
forgot.
is not what I saw. When was that changed? Because
This, again, we don't know when that was changed. We'll try to find out. We've asked.
There
But
should be a date on the bottom of the Google thing, right?
this
Yeah, it
image,
says
this
September
image is,
21.
Number 21.
but when it was changed, I don't.
Because I went down to the end, the map we looked at the other meeting was if you go far left, all the way to the intersection of this street and whatever way down by the light, the train lights. I thought that was marked as 2 hour at our last meeting at the very, very end.
It's resident only until 10:30, then it's 2 hour, from what I understand.
That's what it's marked. That's what I remember it being marked, but on our last map, it was marked as 2 hour. So yeah, that's what I think that says resident only.
Does.
It's head-in
Yeah.
parking.
Yeah. But why would we, if we have 2 hour parking on the opposite side of the street, why are we taking away commuter parking on the other side? We already have a shortage of commuter parking. And I'm gonna
Some people
advocate,
think that the commuters shouldn't be taking up all that valuable space right in the center
Well,
of downtown. that could be used
some
for
of us-
patrons-
some of us
patrons
commuter,
to,
some of us
to the
commuter
downtown
rail,
businesses.
some of our commuter rail people are clearly in need of more parking, not less parking. So I'm just advocating strongly for public transportation. Would you agree with that, Jay?
Yeah, except
Good,
for.
I'm glad we agree.
Can I finish you asked me a question, do you mind if I finish what I was gonna
Go
say?
ahead.
I said, yeah, but more people are gonna take public transportation when they don't have to drive in their car first. Having to get in your car to then go into public transportation is much less likely, as just human tendency, versus somebody who's gonna walk or bike or take some other way to get to transit, they're much more likely to take it. And especially in other cities, you don't have a lot of transit use because people have to drive. And it's like, well, if you gotta drive to get to a bus or get to transit anyways, you might as well just drive all the way in.
I'm talking about people that need to take the train
Yep,
and need to have a place to park.
maybe there's
Let's
another,
just be
but they
realistic.
could get there another way besides driving, that's my point.
Maybe I'll fly down next time. That way I don't have to
This is.
worry about parking.
Nobody from community, let me just finish one second,
I understand
please.
that you're very concerned about your commuter parking, Barney, and I understand that Jay has great ideas about trying to overcome it, but we understand. So we don't have to talk about those issues every meeting.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that if somehow this has been changed from commuter parking to
The only way you're gonna
non-commuter
reduce
parking.
parking demand, the only way is to provide another way for people to get there. You're never gonna reduce it by building more parking. That's not how it works. There's this whole thing called induced demand. It's the same with highways, same with
Yeah.
parking.
Yeah.
That's the problem. All the data supports it.
I think
That's the challenge.
I'm looking at the data that said 97% of the people that go downtown get there by car.
Your data is very small amount. You're talking about the survey?
It's an 800 person sample.
If we
But-
So I think that-
think that as a committee, if we think that there needs to be additional commuter rail parking, I would suggest that those 3 spots or 4 spots, however many there are, then those would go down at the end of, down at Vine Street, where we opened up those other spots. I would not advocate them to be right out at the end of Haven Street. I'm not advocating for either, but from a perspective here, right? If you think we need more commuter rail spots, they should be out out along Vine Street and not right down smack dab in the center of the commercial district.
I agree.
But we have spaces
I
across.
don't think we need them, but
I don't think we do either.
Well, as long as you make it unrestricted, I have no problem. I mean, that would certainly facilitate it. Because we have a commuter rail station. We're very fortunate to have a commuter rail station, and we should accommodate people taking the commuter rail. And to try to make it hostile for those people to take the commuter rail, I think is an inappropriate, it doesn't let's put it this way, it doesn't meet the objectives that this committee agreed upon, which is to make, the maximum number of spaces.
Hospitable. If you build a huge parking garage, then it's very ugly, and nobody's going to want to walk there.
We're not talking about a parking garage.
You look at transit stations that have parking all around them; they're not as effective as ones that drop you in downtown that have minimal parking.
Did I say the words parking garage in what I just said?
Which is extra
Did I say the word
more
parking garage? Did I say the word parking garage in what I just said?
Calm
Yes
down.
or no?
Calm down, Bernie.
Yes, I'm just asking a question.
Calm down. You've talked about parking garages before.
Did I say it in the context of this prior sentence that I said? Yes or no?
Bernie.
Yes or no? It's a yes or no question, Jay.
Bernie, I'm not going to play your little game. It's not that important. Let's move on. It's not a big deal.
I did not say anything about a parking garage. I said that we need.
I wasn't saying you did, and I really don't want to fight about this. Let's move on. This is not.
I'm going to advocate for, for our goals to be met, which is to try to maximize the amount of spaces for the maximum amount of people.
that was a goal that you established, Bernie. I don't think that the board established that as a goal.
I think the board.
That's a great point. Should we vote on that?
The board voted on that.
Should we vote on that?
No, that was not the wording, and we did not vote on that.
Yep, you're right, John.
Would you like to change it, John? How would you propose that we change that?
I'm not, well, first of all, I wouldn't say that if we want to provide parking for the greatest number of people, you know what we do? We turn the entire downtown into commuter rail parking and put out notices to up and down the Merrimack Valley that you can come and park in downtown Reading for free.
I support that, John.
You know what?
I'd like to say I second that.
That would meet that objective.
Yep.
And that is not what we're here about. We're here about providing parking for to facilitate all the different uses that are in downtown.
Yeah, and I think
especially the ones that make the most money, which are the customers that go into the stores.
The commuter rail.
Because we're serving the small business communities, which would most of the people on this board are on small businesses in town, and they want more customers.
Yeah.
That was the original issue.
I think I know how Mark feels, which is interesting. I mean, I'd love to have an opinion on this. Unfortunately, I cannot. I think.
Who do you like in the room?
I like Andrew. You know, him and I want to be playing Call of Duty right now. That's where we're at. So
Halo came.
No, I think the issue that I'm trying to bring up is that we have an inner core. The inner core satisfies the needs for those businesses. It seems like, putting 2 to 4 hour parking, some combination in the inner core makes sense. And allocating some of that to employees, I think may make sense, but I think it keeps some of the customers from parking. And I think having the employees have the flexibility to park elsewhere, and also making those spaces available to non-employees, I think that's all I'm trying to say. And trying to, I think the issue is that trying to micromanage everything and try to be restrictive creates more restrictions, which creates more restrictions, because everybody's gonna want a restriction in front of their business or their property. So I'm just advocating for some flexibility and open-minded thinkings that, we have restrictions in the inner core, that we're trying to do the best for the businesses. And outside that inner core, having far less restrictions and keeping it really simple creates a more inviting atmosphere to people who want to come in and do business.
So Bernie, what I recommend is that you provide a proposal that you agree with, like maybe take one of these maps and mark up what you think it should be. And then we can, look at that at a future meeting.
I would say that everything outside the inner core becomes.
No. You gotta put it on a map so that we can have a debate about it. Not just say, I think this, I think that. You have to actually put it on there.
You want to just
Like come to the next one prepared with a map, and then we'll, I think that makes the most sense.
So I guess my thing is, so Vine Street that everyone keeps mentioning, currently there's only no parking from 6 to 10:30 down there. I assume that's to prevent the commuters from parking there. But what's the issue with actually changing that? Like, do people want to park over there that live there, or like, what is the harm of changing it? Is there
changing it from what to what?
Changing it from no parking 6 to 10:30, why does that exist at all? Why can't we just change it to make it unrestricted? Whoever wants to park there, park there. Like, what's the downside to doing it?
I think that we need to hear from some of the neighbors there to figure out why it is that way. Because something may have happened years ago that they got restricted to prevent commuters from parking there. Just as the people on Mount Vernon, and I think we've talked about this at another meeting, where on Mount Vernon, it's the same issue, where there's a lot of commuters that park on the streets that some of the people may have fought against, and that maybe, I don't know, but I think that we can't just arbitrarily come up with something for that section of town without really letting those neighbors know and having them tell us why it is the way it is now.
That section of Vine Street is 100% that way because that was full of commuters.
Yeah, I believe it.
But
that was, and it was until 2 years ago. That was that's commuter parking, absolutely.
Okay.
So if you remove the, that's the issue there.
It's a pretty narrow street as well, and so I think if you have commuters parking on one or both sides, it's a very tricky street to drive on. And
So, just a quick clarification. So even with the no parking 6 to 10:30, that area was still full of commuters?
Yeah, that's where people would park if they came in late, because everything else would fill up, and that's where you'd get the sort of the later people filling in.
So what's the issue with removing, like, if commuters are parking there anyway, why not let them park there earlier in the day? Was it something with the residents in that area,
or John, are you saying that before that no parking restriction was there, commuters were parking there, and now that it's restricted, they're not?
Yeah, there was 2 different sections down there, right? Is that not the way it is now? There was a section where, right, it says resident permit parking only.
I guess one question I would have is, why is Vine Street different than the pink lined areas like up Woburn and Prescott, the areas that are public resident permit parking only 6 to 10:30? So basically commuter parking for Reading residents. I'm just curious why, or they just didn't want any commuters parking there regardless of where they're
from. Vine Street, it's perpendicular parking along Vine Street. It's not in front of anyone's house. You're not parking in front of someone's house. You're pulling in perpendicular in front of the tracks.
And I don't think there's a sidewalk on one side of the street, if I remember correctly. I think it's on one other side.
So yeah.
So
So it has parking on the left-hand side, all the spots like you just mentioned, and then the right-hand side has the no parking. But it's like one house essentially is for all of this. You know what
So
I mean?
we have-
But I don't know how about backing out of these spots, like how difficult that
Well,
is.
Pretty
north
narrow
of
road,
Vine
looks
Street.
like.
Okay.
Yeah,
This,
I mean, I think, you know,
The corner of
I guess
Vine and
all I'm trying to,
Middlesex.
all I'm trying to advocate is that there's
You could put some spots there.
it's sort of the wisdom of Solomon, right? When somebody says, you know, which side of the baby do you want? It's really a question of if you treat everything equally, then nobody has a reason to say that my next door neighbor has a restriction, and because of their restriction, it's now the parking is in front of my house, and therefore I want a restriction. And then that just spreads like wildfire throughout the town. And the theory is that if you just if you treat everybody the same, nobody can complain that they're being treated or mistreated because somebody else is favored by somebody in this committee.
We're
And
not
that's
trying
all I'm
to
trying to, all I'm trying to say is that if you're a little bit more
Go ahead, John.
egalitarian, you may have less conflict. And if you have less complexity, you might have less conflict. That's
Yeah,
why,
the problem is that equity and equality are not the same thing. So circumstances actually dictate that we can't treat every street the same because they're not the same. The circumstances aren't the same, what they're near isn't the same, and that's why you have to have some regulation.
well,
I mean,
I'm
take it to
not-
the extreme,
actually
like
think that this
handicap
proposal
parking.
is pretty, it's rational, it's very rational, right? Where you have this inner area that's all treated the same, and then the area around it, directly surrounding it, all the same, and almost all the commuter rail, parking along the tracks, the same, except for that one little spot of like 10 spots. I think there's a fantastic rationale. It's not playing favorites. It's
Are these are spaces?
Yeah, and we're trying to drive particular
sense.
behavior
yeah.
like
of what we want.
if you look at the end of Vine Street, there's all this is there a reason why this isn't paved or anything? There's all gravel here and everything. You could fit like 15 spots in this.
You're saying that we could make more spots down there?
If it became an issue in the future, this is the solution for it. They could just pave
Is
this.
it private property?
It says no parking
Maybe
with ours.
MBTA property.
Yeah, the MBTA probably owns that. They probably need access to the track or something.
Oh,
Yeah.
These
If it's
signs,
got gravel on it, it probably belongs to the MBTA.
and just to
When you
clear,
say I'm seeing trees in what Andrew's showing. We're obviously not going to take down trees. What are we
Oh,
talking
no,
about?
he's on the wrong spot. Or no, wait, you could go
Oh,
flip
in the
it.
wrong direction.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're getting
go-
pretty
no,
far
the
away.
other
Go
direction.
90
Andrew, I'm sorry. Can you turn around and go the other way to keep the tracks
Drive
on your
down
right?
that
they sure can. You
Thank you
turn.
so much.
There you go.
Can you obey the speed limit while you're at it?
And I'll just say these signs say no parking at all, not just no parking
Right.
6 to 10.
Well, that you can't.
So
You
Yeah.
can't park.
Yeah,
That's
the
pretty darn narrow.
That makes
of course.
sense.
It's when you get right here to that shadow at the end.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
So, yeah.
Aren't these the formerly leased spaces?
No, all this stuff right here.
Oh,
But if it is the MBTA, then if they need to move stuff through there, then we're hosed. But if
Yeah,
not,
that looks
maybe
Yeah,
like
that's where they
something that trained
probably,
people use.
where they access the tracks.
Yeah, that seems important.
It would be interesting, maybe Andrew, if we could get some information. Tom, you had a very patient hand up.
Yeah, I have to apologize to the committee, and I've tried to listen intelligently, but I'd like to make a request if I could. I'm hearing that some of the issues on this map are not changing. I would like to, as a humble idiot, I guess, like to see the changes, just the changes that are going to take place. I'm getting confused trying to understand what is in place and the change. If I could just see a map, I think I could comprehend better what we're trying to accomplish. If the changes could just, in my mind, just be highlighted.
And maybe what
That's just
and what
me.
changes have been made, because there've been a lot of changes that were made. it's not clear what the baseline is on this, because like
Whatever's
those,
out there right now is the baseline.
well, the spaces that were commuter and are no longer commuter, when did, when did that change and why, and who authorized that?
Well, that was long before this whole thing. Those have been like that for a long time.
What, define a long time?
Like 6 years.
No,
I'm afraid I would disagree with that.
I would too.
Well, then maybe somebody can get the information for our next meeting.
That's exactly that's all I'm asking for.
So I
Okay.
think Julie stepped away, but she did say, I did hear her say that she was gonna do that.
Yep.
Is
Yeah.
just identify what the changes are that are being proposed.
Yeah, she said she was gonna do that. We
Yeah.
requested it, so.
Because I agree.
And Tom, for I think well, that's right. I understand your question. It is hard to visualize here what's different. What Julie tried to do is to use the highlighter to, basically anything that's already on this map as a solid line, like that's the baseline, and anything that we're talking about altering and to be fair, reiterating is just done with the highlighter, the pink and the yellow, the orange.
A lot of the changes that I looked at when I compared the map and all the map colors is expanding the ability for employees to park in some places that were 2-hour parking. So in front of Town Hall, along Woburn Street, the pink highlighter are places where it's not a huge change that's going on. It may be resident only up until 10:30, and some of the changes are, well, let's have it be until 9:30 so that employees can then park there before they have to go to work. Or if it was already 2-hour, we added some places where it was employee. So the changes aren't great in nature. And that's what I asked her earlier today, was there a huge difference between my placement of streets and what her placement was? And it really wasn't a ton of change. That's my comment. I'm sure she can have more to say.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Karen. And I think where the committee sort of has netted out is that if we can just get employees out of those 2 lots and give them somewhere to go, that solves 85% of anybody's issue downtown, is having those lots turn over. And so really the big thing to solve is getting employees out of there.
And telling the employees where they can go. I mean, the law is, if your employees have a hard time parking on the street and getting yelled at, well, that's really something that, to be mindful to the employees, that shouldn't be happening. Because just because I have a place to park in front of my house, you're not entitled to it. It's an open space. So the behavior only of residents that live there. I'm sorry.
And to Bernie's point, consistency among all the different regulations. I mean, right, we're talking about having essentially, right, I think 3 regulations, period.
Yeah, like the pink, yellow,
2-hour
else.
public with resident with employee permit, and then the commuter parking.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, John, my humble observation would be that a lot of this pink that's marked could be without disturbing anybody. They could be up to 4-hour parking. You keep the inner core or the green 2-hour parking, which is close to the businesses. If you expand it out to 4-hour, in our survey, 4-hour accommodates almost 95% of the parking needs. And then if everything else is unrestricted, then nobody can complain that they're being favored over somebody else or not favored. And I think that, most of these employee spaces will go unused for most of the day. And I think it would be useful to allow those to be dynamically demanded by people who need them. And you're probably not going to affect too many people at the end of the day. That notwithstanding that, I reserve my comments with respect to the new developments, which could create more problems. But
well, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, let's take a street, for example, here, like on Woburn Street. Right, the proposed regulation is
2-hour or employee.
2-hour or employee. So I, as a non-employee of anywhere, if I found a spot there, I can go park. I would be able to go park there. If an employee is there and is working for 2 hours, they can park there. If they're working for 4 hours, they can park there too.
Yeah,
They're working for 6 hours. And as soon as that employee leaves, then I could go park there, you know, as a non-employee. So I'm not sure, it's really just giving the okay to employees to park there longer, right?
I totally agree, and I couldn't agree more. And all I'm saying is that if 80% of those spaces that are marked employees or 2 hour are not being used, and I'll tell you how many times I've driven there, and none of those spaces are typically used. Making them 4 hours to accommodate more people is not, there's no downside to that.
I think the issue is going to be that they are going to be used now, because using CVS as an example, all the people there and Venetian Moon alone, that's like 40 people are going to get dumped into this area that were parking most likely in the green before or at Town Hall. So that's, my fear is we put a kiosk in over at CVS and then people are like, yeah, that's kind of annoying. I'm just going to park in the spots with 2 hours, and then the employees are hosed over there. So, I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
you have to, I think that if I was gonna guess, I don't think it's enough pink, but the spots are going to be used.
The
And
pink,
so Bernie,
agree with you,
you're trying to accommodate those people that want to park for longer than 2 hours
Yeah,
somewhere?
yeah.
Is that what you're trying to get at?
Yeah, I mean, all I'm saying is that
That aren't employees?
the data that we have and the anecdotal comments that we had from people say 2 hours is not enough. The reason that we went from 2 to 4 in the 2 lots is for that very reason. There's enough of a contingent of people who need more than 2 and less than 4. And there's no downside making those green areas, aside from the inner core where you want them. What's the downside? I mean, most likely, they're never going to be used for 4 anyway.
I think it's more of
I thought that's what the
reducing.
kiosks were for, so if they can park in the kiosk, they
Exactly.
can park.
Yeah.
as long
But
as
they're
they
not going to
want.
park there, you know, they're going to go somewhere else. But I don't see what the downside is making it 4.
The problem with that is we want to have if we only have 3 regulations, we only have 3. If we add another one onto it, we can't just
Yeah.
make it globally the 4. Like I said, my fear is if you change it to 4, the person at CVS who, is like, the kiosk thing, it's too much of a hassle. Now I'm going to park for 4 hours out in the street, and then where does the employee park that should have been there? I think if they want to park somewhere, they can just park in the CVS lot for their 4 hours, 6 hours.
Yeah, but they're not, most likely they're not going to do that. I mean, the data shows
They're
that we're
not
just.
now. They're not gonna do it now because I don't know if any of you know that there's been a police officer that's been very, very active.
Yes.
And I have noticed in the last week that there has been plenty of parking in CVS.
Yeah.
So
Which is-
I'm amazed how much a law enforcement are going back to what was before COVID, that the spots have opened up significantly. And another factor is that I understand, I guess Andrew or Julie could correct me, but I understand that starting Monday, employee tickets are going to, you can go and buy tickets or buy the parking permits.
They were available last week.
They're gonna be available.
I spent $900, so yes, I already got them.
You already got them.
Yep.
Well, that's because you're a selectman. My
No,
poor employee was told he can't purchase till Monday.
I have
Won't
an
start.
amazing office manager that takes care of anything, otherwise I'd
So-
be hosed.
Tom, you were amazed at the available parking, is that what you were saying?
I was, because the officer started to enforce the
Yep.
parking out there, Jay, and
I believe it.
there is plenty of parking spots all week long.
And that corroborates with Nelson Nygaard's story about, or their, findings that we don't have a parking problem, we just had an allocation issue.
Right.
And it still comes back to where, now, saying that was empty when it was full before, obviously it begs the question, where did all those employees go? Because the employees are still there, so, but they scattered someplace on this map. I just don't know where they scattered and we'd have to wait to hear where, that the residents will come before us and say, we've got too many employees parking in front of us, but
And that's the challenge with just all of this stuff is that there's so many different options. It's not just like water or sand molecules that just go from one thing to another. There's it's human driven decisions, and so you never know what the human's gonna do. The human factors engineering aspect of it is why I like it, at least.
Well, I think it comes back to what Julie and Nina have said with the number of parking spots that we have. I just think now, and we've said this right along, that enforcement, if we have enforcement of the code that we put in place, I think that we may find that the parking isn't as big a problem as we think it is. I think it's just the enforcement of the code that we put in place. And the only thing I suggest is, which has been mentioned again in this committee, is to make the recommendation to the selectmen to make it as simple as possible, that's all. Whatever, if it's 2 hours here or 4, just make it a flat, whatever it is, but just keep it simplified. But I think over the next, I saw it this week, and I think with the tickets, I personally can speak, I have an employee that's waiting to go buy a ticket and get back into what he considers pre-COVID. I think we're gonna see a change downtown, that's.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make our job any easier, we still may have to make some suggestions, but I think
Absolutely.
it's not gonna be as difficult.
One thing I'd like to add, not necessarily for tonight, but just at some point, is to discuss bicycle parking and the inventory of that.
Sure.
Doesn't have to be tonight, because I don't want to go over.
I thought Julie addressed that a while ago, that she said there was a lot more bicycle parking that was already installed.
I'll have to.
No, they mentioned they bought something,
Yeah.
right? Didn't you guys?
Yeah, they bought
just
some
get
racks and they were being
Bike
installed.
shelter at the MBTA. I
There's
don't,
there's a bike shelter at the train station now.
Is it covered?
Well, you ask all the right questions. We ordered sides. The roof, I think, is installed. The sides did not come with the proper equipment to install them, so stay tuned. That's
Interesting.
But
getting shipped to us.
That's exciting though, Julie. Where is the shelter in
So
relation
it's
to?
down by the raised platform.
Oh, yeah.
Not by the depot building, but a little further. Like if you're standing at the Met and looking at the train, it's a little further to your left.
Because
Cool.
anything we can do to
Thanks for that.
incentivize people that are within 2 miles to bike to the commuter rail is one less parking spot. So
When
Bernie should be for that.
when I biked down there, I had a problem with the old bike racks because it was really hard. They weren't designed right for squeezing a bunch of bikes in there, and you'd wind up putting I'd wind up putting my bike in there, and it would, I couldn't get it in. It just didn't work.
There's been a lot of lessons learned,
Right.
Bernie. So, sorry to interrupt you. There's been a lot of lessons learned on that, and so we've come a long way. There's a new one now called Pedalin. What's it called? Pedalin Park, and it's these really nice cages. I think it's probably more than we need now, but they're really cool.
No, I mean, I would, I bike, but I don't think I should be telling everybody else how to bike. But I think it's, the more bikes, the better, and the more bike racks, the more bikes you'll get down there, and I have no problem with that, so. But is that something that as a park commission, I think we just recommend that we put as many bike racks downtown as we can reasonably
I'd
fit?
like to be a little more strategic about it.
I think Shape and Ave is getting some, aren't they? I think that's what the developers said that they would put outside of their building.
yeah, they'll work with staff on a right location.
Are those for the public though, or are those for the residents?
I'm not sure. All I know is I saw bike racks in the
They would be outside with the intent that hopefully commercial customers or public could use them, I believe.
I would suggest following the specs for Cambridge, as far as how they make their bicycle infrastructure, which would probably not have your problems. Or at least having somebody from a bicycle committee look at it. I'm not an expert on that. I've done a little bit of work on that. So
I think I'm one of the few people that bikes downtown. I mean, I know there are a couple of my neighbors who, I see biking down to the train station, but there aren't really that many. I think you put as many up, and if they're full, you get more.
Yep.
It's a very easy problem to solve. This is not.
How far away
rocket
do you live?
science. A couple of miles at least, a few miles.
So I think we're all in agreement on this map. Julie's just gonna do a fancy reverse mapola, and we'll call it a day with that.
I was away for about 10 minutes, so what did I get volunteered to do?
Yeah.
Voluntold.
Oh, yeah. Congratulations.
We're just
You-
gonna do the changes only on a map, Julie. I think we mentioned
Yeah.
it earlier too.
I thought about doing it that way originally, but then I was like thinking, oh, that might be more confusing, so no worries.
Maybe you ran out of time, I can't imagine why.
I was thinking you make like
It's
an
been a busy week.
like an
That
ArcGIS
is true.
shapefile and have all the different.
Coloring is therapeutic, so.
So our next item would be to just get the differential, and then maybe try to tweak that. And review parking no, I don't think we have to do that. Our next item would be discuss compiled recommendations, which I think, isn't that what we've just been doing?
Yep.
Other topics or business, any other? Our meeting dates, regular meetings, 11th and the 25th with a public forum on the 2nd. Is that,
If I can go back to that map, it's sort of the map, but not really. There's some parking that's down along General Way. That is, I mean, I know that's pretty far from town, but it's a good number of spaces and never used, and there's no signage there, and it's not clear if you're allowed to park there, or like I would never park there even if I was trying to go in that part of town, because it's not clear what's allowed and what's not. And then on top of it, right, you get that all the time, right? All the MBTA contractors and everyone parking there. It seems to me like that is very underutilized. I mean, they're striped spaces, and maybe that's a place where you designate where contractors need to park. I mean, it's a little bit far away, but you know what?
Parking there anyway.
Oh, God.
That's actually an idea. That's an
Actually, what we recommend.
Can I just chime in really quick and say that's actually exactly what we do?
Do you?
There's 25 spaces there. It's a lot that's owned by the MBTA, and we've reached out to them, and they don't realize they own it. And that is
sounds about right.
exactly where we tell all of the contractors to park.
Well,
So it's
don't,
this area here, Bernie.
For every project.
what are the other, what are the, get me in there, I don't know, so.
Here's
Walgreens.
Ash and Bolton, and it's this gray area here.
Ash Street, so where is?
You know what Walgreens
McDonald's
is?
or something, right?
The Rite Aid that's there,
Yeah.
what it was.
Yeah.
Used to be
Yeah,
heading
Walgreens.
towards
Rite Aid.
Basket, back of
Walgreens.
McDonald's.
To Julie and Don, is
McDonald's.
there a way that you could make that
Oh,
part
so
of
the-
their application?
on the
that
other
they
side
have
of
to
Main from the
agree
train
their
tracks?
contractors
That's
will
way
park
out.
there? Because I know,
yeah.
both the chief and the deputy chief said they can't do anything except for issue a standard ticket, which isn't a big deal for them. So how could you make it so that they have to park there? Or incentivize them to park there?
You have to ticket them, yes. It's,
You can't ticket somebody who's a contractor just because he's
but they'd
parking.
be
Well, a lot
parking
of
for
it-
2 hours.
A lot of the issues that we deal with are like just from a staff level. So we have pre-construction meetings for all the development projects. We tell the site superintendent, the developer, as many people as they have at that time, that that's where they need to park. They always agree to it. But like then the contractors hire subcontractors and hire subcontractors who come for a day, have a lot of equipment, have things to unload. The word doesn't get passed down. So a lot of the enforcement that we do when we have contractors parking places or not are people who like may have never been told. So we are constantly enforcing contractor parking and we're always trying to tell, like, make sure you pass the word along, like, to every person who's working on your site. But sometimes they would just rather park where they're not supposed to, get a ticket, and have the developer pay for it because it's way more convenient. They're there for 3 hours doing some work. They have a lot of equipment. Like, it's not really,
Cost effective.
yeah.
Cost of doing business.
So,
And if you want development, you're just gonna get this stuff. I mean, it's really hard for a contractor, if he's gotta lug a table saw or a skill saw how are you gonna make them park, 3 blocks away and still do
You
do their
stop,
work?
unload your equipment, and then go park your truck.
But then you, oh my God, I'm into a job and I need a screwdriver, but it's in my truck.
No, I mean.
Then I gotta go, it just doesn't.
I'll tell you this, on the Rise building on the corner of Green and Main, that group was excellent. They would unload their stuff and then they would go.
And that's
there were
possible.
a
Look,
couple-
don't get me wrong, you can have all your tools in a bucket.
Right.
Those are all your tools, you bring them and then go
And
park
they had a
somewhere.
couple of subcontractors that parked in front of my store. I went and talked to them. He
Yeah.
goes, if that happens again, call me.
Right.
Here's my phone number. I'll have them move right away. So, I mean,
It's
they
fair.
were pretty accommodating.
People,
I have this exact problem happening. Our neighbors, it's a flip it, and the guy's a contractor, and he parks out right on 129. I don't know if anyone's ever seen all the trucks blocking 129 right by the flashing light.
Every day I drive.
That I can't even. There you go. I've asked the guy so many times. Is that legal? Can you park there? He's half blocking the side. He's half blocking the sidewalk, but he is usually technically not on the inside of the white line. All that kind of is that a legal place to park?
I can't answer that right now. I'll look into it.
I'd be really,
Ask Brian.
really curious.
unless it's restricted.
Well, it's a state highway or state road.
129.
129. That part's owned by the town, but
John, did you get your comment in that you
Just a
wanted to
little
make
bit.
there?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we had an idea and some way to utilize those spaces. I guess my other recommendation, when or if we see the need for contractor parking decrease some, that there probably ought to, if we can, put some signage up there that sort of indicates that it's okay to park there.
Public park,
If we can get that out of the T.
like a little P sign.
good luck.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, if
I don't
we're,
know they own it.
Yeah, right. That's a point, right? You could probably put up signs, and no one in T real estate would even know for decades.
Do you think that it could,
How much are
do
you
you
gonna pay me
think
to
there
not tell
could be
him?
snow parking? Or guest
has to
parking?
be plowed. Did you say snow parking, Sarah?
Yeah, I was thinking snow or guest, visitor, whatever.
As long as it's plowed
Overnight
before,
parking.
as long as it's plowed
Yeah,
so that
overnight.
people can park there.
I like her solution. That's it. If you want to park, it's inconvenient, but you got your spot. There's 25 of them there. Move it. If not, you're getting towed. I think you just solved the problem.
Hardly.
Congratulations.
I mean, if it's not.
I don't see why, because contractors would come, and in theory, the residents would be out. Unless they're there all day in general, then it goes back to Liz's point, you shouldn't have bought the thing to begin with.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in theory, they get up, they go to work, and the contractors come in and they park there. But there has to be.
I would hesitate to make our solution be MBTA owned.
Oh, well, that's true too. You rain on
But I do
operating.
think getting back to the idea, like the formerly leased spots are a reasonable overnight solution, and the town hall and or Pleasant Street lot are reasonable overnight solutions. Again, if we enforce and tow, to John's point, like ticket and tow if you don't get out and learn your lesson.
The other problem that Deputy Chief Amendola brought up, because I asked about just tow the people, and she said, we can't keep up with the demand of towing the people, that we don't have enough tow trucks to tow all of them, and then it just becomes where they couldn't plow to begin with. So that's why they just said, forget about it, we're not having any parking here at all.
That's not an answer.
That's her answer, and I agree with
I can't
it.
keep up with the amount of towing that I
That's
need
what
to do,
she-
so I don't
that's-
do any.
No, not that we don't do any, that we can't have the parking over there now to begin with because of the amount of people that said that they would move and they didn't, and they couldn't keep up with the towing that had to be done, so that's why they got rid of it in the first place. That's what she told me.
Where was this?
Yeah,
Over
but
at
to
the
John's
senior
point, the
center.
town has to pony up and start dealing with a private tow company if they don't have the resources and build.
And they'll
the
do
people who aren't
it,
moving.
they'd love to do it, right?
Right.
I mean, a private tow company, absolutely. They'll be out there in a flash.
Yeah, just pass the cost on to the person who didn't move their
Let's all
car.
start our own
That's
private
what
tow
I would
company.
assume they did before. There's gotta be another,
Tow trucks, do we?
We don't have our
We
own.
use private.
I would imagine, yeah. I'd be shocked if we didn't, but
I'm sure it's Grace.
I
I'm
don't-
sure Grace says that's our contract.
Right.
Anything else? Do we need a January 11th and 25th meeting, and what are we gonna do?
I wanna ask one question actually. Is it within our purview to discuss any type of like pedestrian connections? Like as far as, I know I had kind of my crazy like list there at the end. But just some opportunities to improve connections. Is that something that we
Yes,
can
well,
discuss
I
or?
think that as it relates to requesting that employees of the downtown businesses park a little bit further away, right, which means they need to walk to their businesses where they work. Looking at those streets and the services that are currently provided and whether there are good sidewalks and whether they're safe enough lighting and all those kinds of things. I think if it's directly related to the areas in which you're looking to add or change regulations, you do that.
I have to go back to my list.
Excellent framing, Julie, thank you.
Makes sense.
Print that out and stick it to the door.
So, what if
That
any,
probably, Jay, I would hope, right, that goes to, we probably need to make sure that there's appropriate snow plowing, and that sort of thing.
Sure.
sounds like a town engineering issue is my guess. They seem to need to opine on a lot of these things. So the January 11th meeting, are we going to try to formalize any final recommendations and then publicize those? Do we need to have a February 2nd meeting, or could we have the public forum January 25th if we wrap everything up between now and then have the public forum on the 25th?
We scheduled for the 2nd so that I would have enough time to hand out the recommendations to people that live in the area for notice issues. So we're supposed to finalize that on the 11th, and that would give me plenty of time to hand out the postcards. So that's why those dates are there.
I think it's
So,
a good buffer.
I don't have any finalized regulations today. The first time we'd actually come down with anything finalized that we could print would be the 11th at the earliest.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think on the 11th, we review the change-only map that Julie very kindly is going to share, and then from there, mark up a map with like, here's what the real thing is gonna be, and that's the thing that we're gonna present on the 2nd, right? I mean, the map is the easiest way to share that information.
Right, so I think anyone that lives on any of those streets, Julie, that is being changed at all has to get something in their mailbox, or door, or whatever. So,
We can get that list.
okay.
So
And
that,
then I guess I would, at some point, you should talk about what Liz just said, like what other types of information or material you want. Because I mean, this map is like, it's not like the coolest looking thing, and not everybody reads maps easily. So if there's any other materials or ways of presenting information that you would like, we can try and help you put that stuff together as well.
Yes, to your point, I can do a spreadsheet of the street with existing to change, just so it's a list for you, if you like that easy.
And maybe, Julie, maybe we can do the map in quadrants, like we had talked at the very beginning, because you can kind of expand a little bit, and then Chris could talk about more parts than just in general as well. But I think if we have a list of things on a spreadsheet and then have a blown up section of just that place, that might help with the visual as well. I know that's probably really hard to do. I'm sorry.
I think the other issue is,
We
The
can
other-
do it.
the other element is the permits. We could probably have those listed as well, Andrew, and what changes we're suggesting on the permits. We have a bunch of different permits.
Yeah.
So if we could have that, maybe try to
Do we-
simplify that as
Do
well.
we know that if we make a recommendation for the kiosk, which it seemed like we were going that direction, how long would it take to actually have those installed? Is that like a 6-month lead time, or?
Probably.
We have to figure out like funding sources and things like that. We had back when the staff were working on this effort, we had some ideas, so I have to just revisit them and see what I think could still be applicable. And then, you know, we'd need to, whether it's Parker, whether it's staff, we need to look into like what vendor, are we leasing or buying them? You know, the different apps that can interface with whatever the kiosk is. Then there's like the third party enforcement technology and that those things all need to communicate. So we probably need to spend some time really like vetting the different products that are out there. So I can try to put together like a sort of rough schedule of what timing we might be looking at for that. If it seems like that is definitely something that the park committee wants to do.
And how much in general is one of them? Is it 10 grand, 50 grand?
So the information we got a couple of years ago, it was about 15 grand per kiosk. Wow. Yeah, and then the enforcement technology is all an added cost as well, and I don't remember what that number was. I'll pull all this information and try to make it more clear for you for another meeting, maybe the next meeting. And you can also, if you want to get into the details about how the kiosks work, we can bring in the consultant that we worked with who can like really answer the detailed questions for you.
You also provided a chart that showed the cost analysis and the profit and how long it would take for it to pay for itself. We have that in our data, our literature, which was interesting. So depending on what day ran and how long, things like that.
Right, and how long your window of charging for parking is each day, and like how many days, if it's 5 days or 6 days a week or 4 days, or, you know.
Right.
The other thing that was related to this conversation, which I don't necessarily want to like throw a new topic at you and I, because I've been out really late many nights this week selfishly, so, but you might want to consider like where that revenue goes, right? And there's a parking benefit district. There's legislation to allow towns to establish parking benefit districts, which have different specified geographies, and basically it enables the funds that are generated through the kiosks to go directly into that certain geography for certain like improvements. So improvements, there really aren't that many strings attached to how that money's used. So it could be like a parking map, it could be better lighting, it could be sidewalk improvements. It can really go back into that district and improving that district. So that's something we can, if the person from MAPC who I'm coordinating with, it does come to a future meeting to talk to you, she's very familiar with parking benefit districts and can talk about that. So that's a little bit of a separate conversation because it requires a town meeting vote, and it's the finance division has to be involved and create like a separate type of account, and it's a little nuanced, but it's something just to keep in your minds and think about. And if you want more information, I can get it for you.
I'd like information on that. Maybe we can talk about that one in the January meetings, because I think that should be part of the proposal anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I think that sounds great, Julie. Do you think we might be able to get them to come for January 25th, and then we can use the 11th to hopefully hammer out our own problems?
Yeah, if that's a date you want to talk to them, I've connected with them, but we haven't, and we're going to meet, I forget if it's next week or the week after to talk about it, and I didn't know if you would want the 10th the 11th or the 25th. I'll give them both dates and see what date in case one doesn't work and one does.
Great.
And aim for the 25th if that's your preference.
And there's an interview that was sent in the last set of emails, so you can watch her talk in person, and she has some websites as well. So if you just search for like perfectfitparking.mapc.org is a lot of the work that she does.
Now, again, the only other thing is
Thanks.
if we're going to recommend kiosks, I would think that we should have the full financial implications of that. And if we're going to add that to our recommendations on January 11th, I think it would be useful to have a lot of the technical and financial details before January 11th, if we're going to even talk about it and then present it. So anything that you can do to get that to us earlier would be better. When I looked at that financial analysis the last time it was presented, there were some pretty big missing gaps. I'll do my best. I will commit to sending you sort of the list of questions that I had put together that, because I think the last time and my other question is, does this have to go to the town meeting? Is it a capital? Does the select board get to make these kind of capital decisions without town meeting's consent, or does it have to go to town meeting? Do you know?
I think it's the dollar figure, isn't it? Because this is like 60 grand or something.
Right.
If it's 4
Yeah,
times
so-
15.
So if we want it to be funded through taxpayer money, yeah, town meeting. But if there's another way we can get money, such as grants, or if there's an earmark, there's different, I'd have to look back at where we left off with that, because we had a bunch of different ideas for how to fund the
Right.
kiosk.
So we'd have to know the strings attached to that funding in order to be able to properly recommend this. So that would have to be part of what you send us between now and January
Well, that would
11th.
work because then April would be town meeting, so it's still.
Julie, can we also find out if opera money can be used for that? Because I know
Sure.
they're putting an opera committee together through FinCom.
ARPA money,
Yeah.
you're good. It's 7-8
I forget
million,
what that is.
but it can only
Oh.
be spent on specific items
Right, so that might be one of the,
that they might qualify. If you put broadband into all of them, then maybe it's a loophole. Somehow they have to have the internet.
Also, for money, there's a shared streets and spaces second round going on January 10th that was announced. I know it was coming up, but it's definitely January 10th.
what is it?
Shared streets and spaces, it's a MassDOT thing where you
What is
can,
that, a grant?
yeah, it's a grant. Yeah, you apply for something and it's gotta be based on,
Is that the deadline or when it opens?
I think that's when it opens. Please don't take my word for that. I'm pretty sure, yeah. Yeah, Jamie Tesler said that this morning.
And then the only other suggestion I have is that if we're gonna try to make final decisions on recommendations January 11th, that's over a month from now. If we could sort of get that, within the next week, right? Just that change map, which shouldn't be too hard. And then if everybody could give feedback back, and then we could get something back again, so that we have something to discuss. Because if we just go from here to January 11th, and we have no discussion in between, we're never gonna come up with a final set of recommendations on January 11th in time to get stuff printed, and so I think we really need to do some work between now and then.
One other thing I'd like to propose to the committee is to look at is if they think it's necessary or beneficial. We've had the police, law enforcement in already to speak to us. I wonder, there's been some changes, as we've discussed already, where or they could send a message or send a report, but it would be nice to physically hear from somebody what, the new officer that they've charged, the parking officer, and see how that's working out, and what their experience is up until,
They haven't.
if they could come in January 11th and maybe tell us where they are with that program and let us know.
So the person given the tickets is actual just normal police?
It's a full-time
No, but the tickets currently is just normal police giving the tickets, so they advertised the position yesterday, I think.
Yeah, I saw that on the Reading
I saw that.
rant, it was pretty funny.
Yeah, I know, but that's why I said, I don't know.
Oh, no, but then they might explain this whole towing thing as well, like,
Yeah,
My wife told me to apply.
yeah. And maybe they can
it's almost full-time now.
shed some light on what we feel, the overnight and all that. If I know they're busy during the day, but if someone would send a messenger or a representative, I think they could shed some information to us how they feel on January 11th.
Plus it'll snow by then, right? Then we'll find out what happens.
Sarah, you had good contact with them before,
You want me to follow up?
if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
Thank you, Sarah.
Any other business before we adjourn? Any motions to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you all.